Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to the awesome latest episode of Paranormal Axetivities with your host, Ben Axe. In just a few minutes, I have the excellent, amazing author of Redbird, Mrs. B.A. Crisp, here joining me. I'm very excited to talk to her and hear about her childhood experiences, her current experiences, and about the book that she wrote and the book that she is writing and all of her awesome, amazing stuff. So that's coming up in just a few minutes. But before that, I got to do the plugs. Again, guys, thank you so much for checking out the show. I appreciate all of you, man. We are available now on Pandora, Amazon Music, Apple Music, everythingentertainment.com. Pretty much everywhere. And, with that, it is finally October. This is the first episode in October, and that makes me very happy. And with that, we are pretty much going all out. Paranormal Axetivities here. We are going all out as the next episode. As a matter of fact, this is the only audio episode of October. The next three weekly episodes, I have my guests lined up for each episode already. And all three of those episodes are going to be live on everythingentertainment.com. And that makes me excited. I like being live. It's a good time. I do live twice a week now with the RSH Wrestling Podcast every Thursday night at 6 p.m. And then I go live with my wife every Friday night at 8 p.m. on Marital Nonsense, all of which is available on everythingentertainment.com. And so I'm pretty excited to be doing this one live for the next few weeks in October. Because one, it's October. You gotta go all out, right? And so not only am I doing the next few episodes live on AEE, Danae and I were also going to be doing a live special episode inside a haunted bed and breakfast here in Ohio. We have the date picked out. It's going to be, if I can remember here, October. So live Friday, October 23rd. We'll be taking a break from Marital Nonsense to go live with Paranormal Axetivities inside a haunted bed and breakfast. So be on the lookout for that. I'm very, very excited. It's going to be a hell of a good time. Hopefully we'll get some ghosties. Who knows? Who knows what we'll find? Who knows what we'll see? But either way, it's going to be a good time. And I know I've been talking about this for a few months now, it seems like, but my paranormal podcast or my paranormal investigation of St. Mary's, Ohio is not over. We have a few more things to do. I'm hoping to have that done by the end of the month, but it's already a huge busy month, so I'm not sure if that's going to be the case. But that being said, that is all of the intro I needed to do for that. So before I bring B.A. Crisp on, I have to do my Paranormal Activity of the Week. So I only have one. My house has actually been pretty quiet. On Facebook earlier, in like a paranormal group I'm in, they were talking about how, it's been more active here in October. I've been hearing that in a few different things, actually. But I've actually been quieter, I think. Like, whatever was going on in my house, it's quieted down quite a bit. And so my activity of the week now actually took place at work, which would be at least the second time that I've had an activity happen there. You guys heard my first one. For you first-time listeners, as I learned from my previous guest, Neil. He always said, each episode is somebody's first episode. So that being said, for those of you who don't listen, I do an activity of the week where I have, activities or paranormal activities happen so often that I can do one weekly. Usually it's at home, but this one was at work. And it's not crazy. I mean, it was weird, actually. It was super weird. So I'm walking down a hallway, kind of behind the building, and I'm going towards a door. I'm just going down the hallway, and I'm going towards the door. I'm not going to go in that door, but I just happen to be passing it. And as I approach the hallway by the door just randomly opens by itself. Like, it opens up real slow, like, and then closes. Boom. And it's a big, heavy fire door. Like, it's the kind of door that won't just open with wind or whatever. It's heavy. It's a fire door that's not meant to open, unless you're physically pushing it. It's latched and everything. And I thought that was weird. So it opened up. I was like, huh. It opened and then it closed. So after it closed, I went over to it and opened it to see if somebody, was messing with me or just opened it and then closed it because they forgot something or, whatever the case may be. But there was nobody there. And, I even messed with it for a few minutes after that to see if I could get the door to like open. I don't even know what I was trying to do, but every time I opened it, it latched shut. So there's no way that it was just open and then like maybe the wind pushed it or whatever. Nope. I have no idea. I'm not saying it was a ghost because doors open and close all the time, I guess. But just, it was heavy. I was by myself and I don't understand how it could open the way it opened and close. Because it didn't just like, flip open. Let's say it was windy, which, we're inside a building. But let's say it was windy somehow. There's a open door somewhere else or an open window that caused like a suction. Let's say that was the case. It's a heavy door. And then that just opened like halfway and then closed like right in front of me. And the odds of that even happening when I'm there, I didn't open anywhere. I just came down a hallway, like, I don't know. It was super weird. And that's my activity of the week. I know that wasn't as exciting as previous ones have been, but a door opened and closed by itself. So I don't know what to tell you. But that being said, that's enough of my nonsense. So the author of Redbird, available on Amazon.com. And be sure to follow B.A. Crisp on all of the social media platforms. Facebook at B.A. Crisp Author, Twitter at B.A. Crisp Writes. And you can also follow B.A. on her website at www.bacrisp.com. But with all that aside, let's have you guys go ahead and meet B.A. Crisp. So, Mrs. B.A. Crisp, how are you doing today, ma'am?
I'm doing really well. Please just call me BA. No, ma'am.
Fair enough. All right. So, BA, I appreciate you being on the show. It's an honor to meet you, and thank you so much for taking the time and hanging out with me today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm excited, and we'll have a lot to talk about, I'm sure.
I'm super excited. But first, let's talk about, I know you're an author. You have a book called Redbird, available on Amazon. Is that correct?
I do. And I don't know if everyone will see it, but there it is.
Awesome.
Yeah. And we are almost ready with book 2. They're telling me we're trying to settle on titles and covers, but this is Redbird is part of a sequel or a series, actually. And it's loosely based on my life growing up in Ohio. It's a fictionalized paranormal sci-fi sort of story. And it's the second book. It kind of continues on with our protagonist, Samantha Ryan Blake. So we're pretty excited.
Awesome. Well, that's awesome. I can't wait to check it out. It sounds pretty cool. I know you mentioned growing up in Ohio. One of the things I thought was really interesting when we first started talking was you mentioned that my phone number was 419. And it turns out we actually have like some things in common when it comes to Ohio. I was born and raised here, and you were as well, in the same area code, actually.
Yes. So I was actually born in Sandusky, Ohio, and I spent my early childhood as a ward of the court and foster child. And when I was a young lady, I was probably 8 or 9 years old when we was moved to a remote farm in the middle of nowhere, very close to NASA Plumbrook Station.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So there were some crazy things that went on that we witnessed, that I saw. I spent a lot of time. I was really an outdoorsy kid. And I spent a lot of time outside, roaming through the woods, swimming in the river, the Huron River, going up to the lake, tracing around. And saw some really strange, kind of cool things. Sometimes some unknown things that still haunt me to this day. And yeah,
that's awesome. I know the lake out there is really nice. I go to Lake Erie probably once a year still, and I really like it out there. So let's talk about some of your early stories. I know you said that you've seen all kinds of things from like potentially UFOs to paranormal spirits to even Bigfoot, I heard. So let's talk about some of those. Let's talk about some of those stories. Like, if you can remember anyway, what do you remember about, early on with the paranormal stuff? Like, what did you first see, first hear, that kind of stuff?
Well, I think the wildest thing that happened. So, I never as a kid really, up until we moved to this farm, experienced anything out of the ordinary. So when we arrived at the farm, there were a couple of incidents that took place. One of those incidents, I was out at a jungle gym. I was probably 12 years old, and I was with my brother, and I was with 2 other people. And we were trying to do a seance. So we were trying to do something called 2-finger pickup. And I don't know if it's where you levitate somebody off the ground.
Oh, I've
and
heard
it
of
wasn't
that. Yep.
So I'm watching everyone to make sure their eyes are closed because I was a little bossy. And I looked, so our farm, there's a road and it kind of went uphill. And on the top of the road, I saw somebody coming over the hill. And I thought, okay, well, it was nighttime. It was nighttime. It was a July summer night. I do remember that. And somebody is coming up kind of toward us, bipedaling toward us. And I kept looking, because what I found very unusual was that they were white from head to toe.
Oh, wow.
Very, very tall. So I thought, I don't understand what that person, but why are they in a space? What are they wearing? And we used to have military ops out there periodically. We never knew what they were about. But somebody made the comment, oh, maybe it's a guy in a ghillie suit, and it was not a guy in a ghillie suit. So we, as it approached the border of our property, where there was a tree and a field and our yard and the road, there was a big street. There was also a street light, the only street light, and this got through the street light, and I mean, instantaneously when it hit that light, I was like, this thing's not human. This is not human. So I pointed my finger and I said, oh my God, what's that? And this thing turned its torso and it galloped on all fours away into the woods. So we made a beeline for the door. We were fighting for the screen door because we were so scared. And it turns out that later, and everyone said, oh, I remember my dad at the time, who turned out not to be my dad at all.
Oh, wow.
And that's a story. So he said, oh, they're crazy and blah, blah, blah. So years later, when I was in my 20s, I went back and I started doing research in the local library. And I have another friend, his name is Steven, who's in Monroeville, Ohio. Oh. And he remembered an incident of his mom where she claimed one night that, and she had a baby, and she one night that there was something white, a white furry creature looking in the windows. And they lived probably 2 miles from us, so maybe less. And she claimed it was trying to get in the windows. Well, when her husband came home from work, he worked right to the factory. He said, "Oh, woman, you're crazy." When she died many years later, and one of the sons inherited the home, whatever, but behind the mantle, they had a railroad tie mantle on their fireplace, and wedged behind the mantle was a letter that she had written that if anything happened to her, there was a white creature outside. So that was a little bit, yeah. So I had a little bit of validation there. It was just crazy.
Absolutely. That sounds pretty crazy. I've never personally seen anything like that, just this, your typical paranormal stuff, but I've gone in the woods looking for things like that, especially in Hawking Hills and stuff. And I have to imagine seeing him get down on all fours. That sounds terrifying. And
way. But it was more startled because it sort of jumped back, like it didn't expect anybody to be outside at night that late, especially kids, I guess. And when it ran into the woods, it went so fast to this cornfield. There was no way that this was human. And I also remember growing up, and I have to preface this, and I'm very open about it. So my brother would say, please don't tell me. Don't tell anyone, because our mother was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, and it was, you'll be crazy, labeled. So I did. I let it go for years. And I spent years just trying to, better my life. I mean, it's kind of tough as a foster kid, and I went through a lot of experiences, but I finally did manage to graduate from George Washington University with a master's, and I was a co-valedictorian. And I attended Oxford at Exeter College, the writing program, and the London School of Journalism. So I wanted that little bit of credibility.
Absolutely.
I would build that credibility before I revisited the things that happened to me as a child. So
that's actually a really good idea too. It is always good to be validated. Like my wife has a lot of experiences, and sometimes she feels the same way. Like she can't talk about it because people will call her out. And this,
right.
like you mentioned with the tall white thing, it was validated by somebody else. So it's always good to. It just feels good to be validated, I think.
Yeah. Well, and it was funny too, because, the next day I remember the military trucks going by, and I remember locking eyes with the soldier, and they were all in the back of the truck. And I'm like, are they looking for that thing? What's going on here?
Probably.
And yeah. And we've had experiences over Lake Erie with strange lights that come up over the lake, and nobody knows what they are. I had an experience, 16, same house on the farm. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw a blue being. It was a figure of a blue being person in my doorway. And I wasn't scared at all. In fact, I felt an overwhelming sense of love and peace. And I remember looking at this thing and I was so not scared. And I thought, I'm trying to focus my eyes. And I said, Mom, because I thought it was my stepmom. And then I said, Ken, who's my brother. And it wasn't either them. There was no answer. And I just got out of bed, walked to the door, waved my hand through, and I looked across the hall to my brother's room, and I said, oh, there's a light out there. There's a light just coming through the door. Well, when I went back to bed, I looked back in the doorway, and I got the chills because I realized somebody had been standing there, and it wasn't human.
Right.
And,
spirit.
Yeah. Yeah. So I try to look at these sorts of things. I like looking for scientific explanations.
Right.
I really think, we don't know what our industrial military intelligence complex is working on.
Absolutely.
So maybe, we were involuntary, non-informed guinea pigs for testing. How we react. Maybe it was a psyop. Maybe it was, maybe they were spraying the plants with something. Maybe, who knows? It is to see what sort of effect it had. I mean, it could be any number of things.
That's absolutely right. And I live near Wright Pat Air Force Base now. And so, that being said, anything that I see in the sky that's weird, my thought process is probably not a UFO. It's probably military something,
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to look at that kind of stuff first because, I obviously believe in ghosts and I believe in UFOs. But if you just say everything is a ghost or a UFO, then you kind of lose credibility. You have to look at all the scientific evidence first. Otherwise, you don't really believe in anything because you believe everything is different, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And and the experiences go on. So as I grew up and I went into private sector work, so we have a consulting firm in DC, and we've worked with the Science and Technology Director at Homeland Security. We work with people who used to work with DARPA, and I remember the outreach for that. I asked the guy, I said, "How did you find me for this one project we were working?" And I said, "How did you find me?" And he said, "Well, I just had someone run you down." And I thought that was a little bit peculiar. I never really got a straight answer for that. And then I found myself in upstate New York at a defunct missile silo, which was, and I spent the weekend there doing some work. And I remember sitting back saying, I've always felt like there's just been this draw or something that sort of happens where I find myself surrounded by types of people and these things, and I worked with federal agents on anti-human trafficking initiatives.
Oh wow!
I find out that it sort of permeates my life, and it's been a fascinating ride so far. And I thought, why not fictionalize it? Why not take some of the things that happen and put the fictional spin on it? And it's been cathartic. It's been cathartic to do that.
Well, that's excellent. And that's the way to go. Most stories, they always say, and I believe it, nonfiction is always better than fiction. So when you take the real life parts of it and put it in a story, that's going to be a fantastic, amazing story.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what Samantha does in the book. You know, she starts out in book one as a rebellious teenager. She's the ward of the court, and she's taken to a remote farm as a foster kid. And there are other kids there, and they don't realize it, but they're going through training, and not to be assassins or anything like that, but to do clandestine type or covert work is whether it's CIA case officers or in area or some other area of the government. And it's pretty, and no one really has superpowers, but what Samantha discovers is her blood is a little different, and she's a hybrid. I don't really, I leave it to the reader to decide what that means. Was it an epigenetic experiment? Is she extraterrestrial? Actually, what is going on with her? So she doesn't know. And it starts out in the early 80s. Get back.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it begins in 1984. And there's a lot of nostalgic references to things in the 80s. Book 2 takes place between 91 and 92. Okay. And then we're going to move through time.
Gotcha.
And
that's awesome. I'll check that out for sure. That sounds pretty awesome. I bet my wife would like that as well. She's really big. She's into books and she reads a lot. She writes herself. That'd be fantastic. So going back, 'cause I'm still kind of focused on that for some reason. The tall white thing you saw. So what is your gut instinct? What does that tell? What do you think that was? Was it alien in your opinion? Was it like a monster kind of thing? Like, what do you think that could have been? What your gut says?
I don't know. So my gut says that maybe we're playing with stuff in a lab.
Oh yeah.
At that NASA Columbrook station that we are never going to know about. Now they said we did propulsion systems, and they were working with cryogenics because space is cold, and they wanted to see how certain gases and things worked in space. And they were trying to build a nuclear plane at one point. And then they decommissioned that entire thing back in 1974. Wow. They also eminent domained all that. So they picked about 40 families off of the property, and it had been in their families for generations, and they fenced the whole thing. So there was another company, and this is common knowledge, named Sierra Lobo, and they poured millions into it. But when I dig deeper, it's still kind of gone. Oh, wow. So I have to wonder what is going on there. Now, I have no need to know. I have no clearance, nor will I be given it, nor will you.
Right, absolutely.
So, anyone who's listening. But I would like to know how the tax money is being spent. And so going back, circling all the way back to your question, I don't know. And my hope is that they weren't doing some sort of cloning gone wrong, because I think about the ethical implications of creating a sentient creature who cannot go out in the open, and how sad that would be.
Right. So, that would be very sad. It actually, I don't know if you ever watched the show Stranger Things or not, but it kind of reminds me of that scenario. Mm-hmm. Like they're doing some kind of experiment.
I had written the book prior to Stranger Things, and when Stranger Things came out, I was like, "Oh wow!" So, but it's not the same. It's different.
Right.
So it's different. But it's just been a wild ride, because we would have things happen on the farm, like things would get moved. And I remember there was a book, Skywalker book, or Skinwalker, the Skinwalker book, and it was out in Utah. It was a ranch out in Utah.
Gotcha.
And we had some of the same things that would happen on this farm. Things would go missing, lights would go on and off, kind of poltergeist type activity. And from a, again, if I try to look at it from a scientific perspective, like, all right, well, everything comes down to frequency, vibration, and energy.
Right.
So if that's the case, then maybe it is possible, maybe there are, and I don't even like to call them gifts. I think it's just some sort of memory that we have lost on how to do certain things. And when we're under stress, because I was under, stress as a kid, and when you're under stress, maybe, things can happen, maybe, and I think about Uri Geller and running spoons and all that, but we had that kind of weird activity going on there. And I think what's interesting about NASA Plumbrook too is that it is I think one of the lowest electromagnetic fields around, and they don't have a lot of volcanic, there's not activity in that area. Yeah, and in fact, most of the people that live in that area have to take iodine. They don't get enough. They don't get enough out of from food they grow.
So why would the magnetic field matter in a scenario like that? Like, what would be the purpose of going?
Oh, sorry. I think it would protect a nuclear warhead. You don't want to, but then you got the potential for some earthquakes now because of fracking. They've actually had earthquakes up there. So I think that if you have that lower electromagnetic field, and I think that's right. I could be wrong on that. Maybe it's higher. Now I can't remember. I thought it was lower.
Yeah, I can't even tell you. I have no idea about magnetic fields. So
maybe messing that up. And somebody, I'm sure, one of your listeners can school me. That's fine.
Yeah, they do that. They'll come at me sometimes too. I'll say something like I wasn't being literal, but but cool. So it sounds like a lot of your stories come from a rural, secluded farm area, which I find pretty interesting. There's nothing out there. What's going on to cause all of this stuff in a rural community? Yeah. So do you think it's all government related or paranormal related, or what do you think is actually going on there?
Well, I maybe a little bit of both. And who knows why the fence was put up. So one of the really interesting things about that area is that if you look up old 1800, first we have a lot of burial mounds. I know you know about the Serpent Mound in southern Ohio.
Sure. I've been there many times.
We also had mounds outside Monroeville and Sandusky, Ohio, but they tended to be plowed over. So they're not famous. They're not known, but they're there. And I remember as kids, there was a road, Perry Road, which is now paved. It wasn't paved at the time. It was like a dirt road. Then it became a gravel road. Gotcha. And people would go back there to park. And I remember one time I was parking with a guy, and we were in the backseat, and there was we saw this light coming toward us. All of a sudden, it broke off into all these lights, like 6 little orbs of light, and we thought, oh my God, it's the sheriff. They're coming to knock on the windows, right? And boom, around the car and disappeared. You never saw 2 teenagers get dressed and get out of there so fast. And my heart was beating. I said, "What was that?" And we were both so freaked out about it and embarrassed too. There's a lot of shame back then, and it's kind of a Puritan environment, and you just you don't do that. And anyone who has a normal childhood does that.
Absolutely.
So anyway, it's like they split off, and it was like boom, boom, boom on each side, and that was really weird. But there's a burial mound back there. The other thing that's really intriguing is in that area, the Indians used to come, or the Native Americans used to come. The Native Americans used to come, and in Peru Township, they would gather around a natural spring, which became a well with a pump well. So they would gather, and they did not settle there. They gathered there for a special ceremony, and they had these special ceremonies, but they wouldn't live there. And they uncovered. So when the farmers started to settle there in the 1800s, there were actually old news stories about how they found skeletons where the skulls were so big they could wear them as helmets.
Oh, wow. And
when they asked the Native Americans, the Wyandots, Iroquois about this, they said, they were here before they are not of our kindred. And they were from up there. And all those, that NASA Plumbrook Station, there were farm fields around there where a lot of those skeletons were found. And all of a sudden, it's eminent domain. can't get in there. There's signs all over. Authorized personnel only.
Right.
Deadly use of force, whatever. So it's pretty. To me, that's pretty interesting. And
That
the
is.
body, and the bodies were found sitting up, and they were facing east or west. I can't remember which direction, but they faced east or west. And all the bodies were buried standing up, and it was freaking farmers out because they didn't want to disrupt these burial grounds. And because at the time in the 1800s, people were a lot more superstitious than we are today.
Sure.
And, and they thought it would bring bad luck, upon them. So
I believe that. I mean, I still believe that kind of stuff, honestly. And there's a lot of stories and a lot of experiences of people who experience paranormal activities in ancient burial grounds, that kind of stuff, that have been, disturbed, paved over, remodeled, or whatever. And I still strongly believe that if you go do that, that's going to mess with whatever spirit is hanging out there for whatever reason, and could cause activities, and probably not good activities, and a lot of times. And I gotta say, that makes me scared to live in Ohio a little bit after hearing about the the heads.
No, I think Ohio is, it's kind of this heartland of I call it the heartbeat of USA, and it's. And when I was growing up, I hated it. I couldn't wait to get out.
Same.
But we always, as we age, I feel like we come full circle. So I actually revisited about 3 years ago, and I went back to the farm, and no one was there. It was very eerie. It was really real. It was just surreal to be there. All of a sudden, this guy pulled up in a pickup. And I'm talking the whole family. The whitest hair I've ever seen with the blue eyes, and very nice. He let me go to farms, and they were pointing things out to me, and he had done a hell of a job remodeling portions of the house. And I remember asking the lady, "Do you ever go down in the basement?" Because I hated to go down in the basement.
That's fair.
But they had redone it, and it was very light and airy and clean. Nothing like it was when I was a kid. But I looked at the woods, I looked at the field, I took a bunch of photos, and the one thing I was disappointed to see was across the street from our home was a lone tree in a cornfield. And it was there for years, but it had been cut down. But the reason I bring it up is because another night I was outside with my brother. We were like this, looking up at the stars in the tree and the grass, and these three vertical beams of light just went ping, ping, ping in the tree, and we just both freaked. And again, we run back to the house. We're scared,
Sure,
but we decided to go up. We're in the next day. We go tromping over there, and to our great surprise, there are these huge carved concrete slabs, and one was partially moved, and I could get a flat. We had to go back to the house, get a flashlight, come back, and look down, and there were stairs that went underground.
Oh,
yeah.
Did you go down?
No, we couldn't. You couldn't get it. Like it was only like maybe triangular.
Gotcha.
Like this
Oh
big.
yeah.
So we tried to move those concrete blocks. As kids, you think you can do all that, right? And we couldn't even budge them. Like, didn't even scrape them a centimeter. So they were just too locked in there. So we asked our stepmom about it. She said, "Oh, you guys, it's just I think there was an old house there, and that was the cellar, and they just don't want anyone going down there." And I thought that was weird. But the other thing that was weird in the field was they started digging up bones, and they've since built houses over that field, but they started digging up bones there was a little known Civil War battle fought there.
Oh wow.
And they found bones of soldiers. And I remember my stepmom one night, we had to have the sheriff come out, and my dad ran outside with a gun, and she screamed. She was getting ready for bed. Somebody was looking in the window, and he told me later, she said it wasn't human, and it had red eyes, but it was wearing a hat, a Union hat, like a Union Army hat.
So it's probably a spear of a Union soldier from back then.
Yeah.
Dang.
It's pretty crazy.
That is. And Civil War stuff is fascinating. I've always, like, I love going to Gettysburg and that kind of stuff. And there's just so much history on our land there. So basically, in my opinion, wherever you build a house or any kind of building, wherever these battles were held, it's probably going to be haunted in some way. Whether, if a lot of death there, that's a lot of negative energy, as you mentioned earlier. Everything is energy. And, it doesn't go away. You can't destroy energy as far as I can tell. So
you can change it, but I don't think it can be. If I understand the laws of physics correctly, you can only change energy, not destroy it.
Absolutely. So I would guarantee that's probably a spirit from the Civil War, and probably, if he has red eyes, probably not a happy one. I don't know if.
Yeah, and I think it's really crazy when you think about that. That, like you said, the energy, and other people had seen. I just watched a video not too long ago. Somebody was driving with their family. Did you see that?
I posted it on my page.
They saw the two people. Yeah, that was crazy.
It was. And it'd be hard. I mean, it didn't look fake. It looked pretty legit.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's all kinds of videos like that where you just kind of see them fade in and fade out, and and when it's that little, I guess, if that makes sense, that little resolution, or whatever, you can kind of tell when it's fake or not. And there's no reason to believe that was docked in any way. So that was a very crazy video.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of things that do have merit that we don't understand, that are, to us, paranormal until they're proven otherwise. Right. And I do think that because of frequency energy vibration, we're able to do a lot of things, and I do a lot of reading. I love Nikola Tesla.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I know he died penniless, and I know that, but he, and a lot of people don't know that he once worked for Thomas Edison, right, who was from Milan, Ohio, who was born, which, by the way, his home is maybe a mile and a half from that NASA station.
Oh, wow.
Milan. Yeah.
Well, that can't be a coincidence.
Yeah. So I always wonder, and Tesla plays a part in book two of this, the Quanta Chronicles is what the series is called.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah. So I look at all that stuff, and I just go, I think Tesla may have been onto something. He may have known more, and he still has papers that have not been declassified. And I know he was working on weaponry for the government, and he had something called a death ray, but he talked about a cloaking device that he had figured out a way to use a plasma field, cloak planes, cloak continent.
Dang.
And I thought that was really interesting, because if you think about being able to cloak something like a military plane, and if it didn't have any sound, how cool would that be?
Oh, absolutely.
And you couldn't detect it on radar. And then take it the other way. What if you were able to create a holographic, using the same technology, but reverse engineer it, and holographically, you could create a military base out in the middle of nowhere. There was nothing. And you're not risking lives if it gets hit, but then you're out your enemy's technology. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. That would be, I never thought of, I've thought of, the cloaking devices, but I never thought about it the other way. That would be amazing, actually. That would be unreal. I don't even know how, the fact that Tesla was in that area, that can't be a coincidence. So like you already mentioned, there's all kinds of stuff they're doing out there that we just have no clue about.
Yeah. And that's where I think we go back to what you stated about Ohio. I think Ohio is underrated. It's extraordinarily magical in terms of paranormal activity and the goings-ons. And a lot of people, we're a very, I always say Ohioans are extraordinarily non-confrontational people.
That's fair. I would agree with that.
I would say that. Somebody can tell us anything and we'll go, and then we'll look at each other and go, he's fucking weird.
Right.
But we just don't like the confrontation.
Sure.
But I think that we also are not going to, we're sensible people. We're hardworking people, and I'm talking Ohioans generally are hardworking, productive people, and we tend to, and we're no nonsense in a lot of cases, and I think that a lot of people in Ohio, they have experienced things, and I encourage them to come forward, because I think there are a lot of people, especially our old timers up there,
Absolutely.
who are holding stories, but they're too afraid of ridicule and stopping, because that's what happens, right? With media, with the military,
Sure.
if you're onto something, that could be easily explained, and it has to do with weaponry, yeah, of course you're going to get credited, because the discredit campaign is the easiest way to shut you down,
Sure.
and they're going to win. But they're Goliath, you're David. So
absolutely, you can't really go head to head against the government in any way. But that's absolutely right. Even my dad has a UFO story from a long time ago, and I did a UFO episode like 2 weeks ago. I was like, Dad, you need to come on and tell your story. He was like, no. And so I convinced him to, but it was that same kind of mentality where he was just like, well, people don't want to hear it, so I'm not going to say it. But no, people should come out and say it. And that's kind of the point of this show in general, is to get all of these people who have stories and kind of put them as puzzle pieces, basically, and put them together. And, we have all of these different people with different backgrounds and different experiences and all of that. Maybe that can kind of paint a bigger picture of what's really happening. What are UFOs? What is the paranormal, and that kind of stuff. And so it's absolutely, everybody who has any kind of experience at all should come out and talk about it, because we all know you're not lying. We all know you're not making it up, because what's the point of that?
So do you want to hear my weirdest story?
Absolutely, I do.
So I'm an adult now. Well, I don't think I've ever grown up, but I'm an adult. And so fast forward quite a few years, and I'm now living outside of Cleveland in Sycamore Hills. And at the time I was very blessed. We had an extraordinarily large home. And I don't say that for bragging purposes, because I married into it and I feed it. So it wasn't mine.
Sure. Fair enough.
But so I had this, I woke up and I looked over. My husband was sleeping, and I remember touching him because he was asleep. And something had awakened me, and we had a door in our bedroom. And the door was, and I sat up in bed and I looked out at the door summer night, and all of a sudden I'm outside. Like that, instantaneously. I am in the valley looking up at the house at my mother-in-law's portion of the house. And then there was an awning and patio furniture and stairs that went up, and it was a very wide veranda. And there was a hill and there were trees on the side, but there was a clearing the kids used to sled down. But I'm in this valley, and behind me I'm in more woods. So I look over, and there's a very tall, flesh-colored type of being. And it's almost looks like your typical gray, but he's tall.
Oh, wow.
And that surprised me. He had 3 digits, not 5, and very long, almost like that ET finger.
Oh, nice.
And I look, and I said, and I wasn't scared, but I kind of, and didn't talk verbally. And I remember thinking, how did you get here? And he said, he takes his finger and he does like this little equation with these symbols that were like, kind of like hieroglyphics, but they weren't Egyptian hieroglyphics. And he basically says, we roll down the slope of a perfect right triangle. And I'm like, what the hell does that mean? And I remember having this conversation with this being and trying to figure out how he gets here, and him talking about we've got it wrong with gravity, and that it's an electrical universe. Therefore, the energy is in abundance and free. And that something in front of that takes the drag away of the craft. and they tilt sideways. They don't fly a disc like this. They actually tilt sideways. And which I was like, that's weird. So he kind of, we had our conversation, and I looked back up at the house, and that's when I got scared, because all of a sudden through the cloud, I mean, right over the house, huge ship. And I just went like, and I looked over it. It was so intimidating. And I looked over at him, and he was laughing, but he didn't make a sound. And he had his fingers on his throat because he thought it was funny. He pranked, and I was back in bed. And that was a pretty, and I have never forgotten that, because it made such an impact on me. It really,
absolutely.
It really.
How long ago was that, do you think, if you can remember?
Oh my gosh, I'm going to say that was probably about 22 years ago.
I feel like I would be scared if that happened to me. So bravo to you for not being scared.
I wanted to come back, but yeah, it's really kind of cool. So I'm going to do a little bit of it's not really a segue. I'm going to be a little tangential here, because, when that event happened, it really got me thinking. And then my son, my second oldest son, I have 4 kids. So my second oldest son remembers being in that house, and he came down the hall, and he came looking for me, and he went into our bedroom, and it scared him, because he said there was a strange person sitting on your bed. And he's 30 years old today. So I asked him, you remember that? He goes, of course I remember it. He goes, it scared the hell out of me. And he said, it wasn't. Yeah. He goes, I don't know what it was or who it was. So.
There's your validation. I mean,
yeah. So
that's awesome. Well, hey, I really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me today on the show. I would love to have you back sometime. I know you have a lot more stories. So, and be sure to check out BA at www.bacrisp.com. Check out her book, Redbird. And that's all available on Amazon.com. And is it available anywhere else or just Amazon?
It is. It's available at Dymox, which is in Australia. It's available at Barnes & Noble. It's available at Blackwell's in the UK.
That's worldwide. That's awesome. Yeah. And be sure to check out BA. We also have Facebook at BA Crisp Author and Twitter at BA Crisp Writes. Does that all sound correct?
Yes.
All
yes.
right.
So if anyone's got questions, send me a Twitter question, email me, whatever, or get in touch with me through the website. And I hope you read the book.
Oh, awesome. Cool. Well, again, thank you very much. I had a great time, and it's always fun and awesome to talk to other people from Ohio, because honestly, I don't talk to a lot of people in this paranormal field from Ohio. So it's always cool to kind of go home, I guess.
They're in hiding, but they're there.
Oh, absolutely.
They have stories.
And we're going to find them. We're going to find more. That's the goal.
Yeah. Bravo.
All right.
Bravo.
Well, thank you very much, and have a great day. Awesome.
You too. Bye.
All right, guys. That was, again, B.A. Crisp book, Redbird, available on Amazon.com. And also, again, I know we've mentioned it several times, but she's an awesome human being. Follow her on Facebook at facebook.com/BA Crisp Author. Again, follow her on Twitter at twitter.com/BA Crisp Writes. And be sure to check her out at her website, www.bacrisp.com. I hope to talk to her again real soon. That was an awesome interview. I really loved talking to her, actually. So that's going to go ahead and wrap up this episode of Paranormal Axetivities. I hope you all enjoyed it. Again, be sure to check us out on alleverythingentertainment.com, all of your favorite podcasting platforms, and be sure to check out all of the other amazing podcasts over at alleverythingentertainment.com, including The Boardroom every Tuesdays at 8 p.m., including, there's so many now. There's Game Winning Drive. There is Stand Your Ground, which we have to make fun of, but it's still fun. There's so many, I can't even name them all now, but go to the website, check them out. We have video packages that show you guys everything, and it's a pretty phenomenal place to be. I'm very fortunate to be a part of it, and I'm very fortunate to have the show with you amazing amazing listeners. I'm very excited to keep going with this. I'm very excited for this super busy, super jam-packed October, but I'm hoping to deliver you guys some entertaining, I should say, shows. So again, I appreciate all of you. Keep checking me out. Tell your friends, tell your family. Go to all of the wherever you get your podcasts. Listen, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, Facebook. I'm on, I don't even know now, Instagram now at paranormal __ activities. I'm not drunk, I promise. But I've realized my social media game isn't that strong these days. I just don't care. I have a hard time. It's not that I don't care. It's not true at all. I just I don't know. I'm just busy, I guess. So I'm oh yeah, I gotta get on there. I don't know. I don't know if I'm getting old. I am 33 now, so maybe I'm just getting old. I don't know. I need to get my social media game on point. But anyways, hope you all enjoyed it. And that's going to go ahead and wrap it up. So again, I love the interview today, and I can't wait to keep learning with you guys together.